My name is Audrey Carter. I'm 32 years old, and until recently, I was just another marketing manager in Denver's competitive corporate landscape. At least, that's what my family thought. I always believed family meant unconditional support, but that belief was thoroughly tested over the years. Growing up with my parents, Linda and Robert, and my younger sister Ashley, I learned early on that the Carter family had a clear favorite, and it wasn't me. I never expected to be standing outside the Meridian Investments annual board meeting in Chicago, banned from entering by my own flesh and blood, and I certainly never imagined that just hours later, those same shareholders would vote me in as CEO, forever changing the power dynamics that had defined my entire existence. What happened next flipped my entire life upside down. But to understand how I went from family doormat to corporate powerhouse, you need to know where it all began. I was always the quiet one, the responsible daughter who followed the rules and worked twice as hard for half the recognition, while Ashley cultivated her social media presence and demanded endless financial support for her influencer aspirations. I put my head down and built something real, something sustainable. My parents never noticed. To them, Ashley's growing follower count was more impressive than my consistent promotions and careful financial planning. "You'll never have Ashley's star quality," my mother would say, not even trying to hide her disappointment in me. My father would just nod along, too absorbed in Ashley's latest scheme to notice my achievements. The pattern was established early and reinforced often. Last January, Ashley called me in tears, claiming she needed $15,000 immediately for what she described as a career-making opportunity, a luxury vacation to the Maldives where she'd network with other influencers. I transferred the money that night, despite the knot in my stomach. "I'll pay you back in 3 months. Aud, this is going to change everything for me," she promised. The money never came back. When I finally brought it up at my parents' Thanksgiving dinner 8 months later, my mother actually laughed. "Oh, Audrey," she said, passing the cranberry sauce to Ashley without even looking at me. "You can't expect your sister to prioritize paying you back when she's building her brand. Besides, it's just money." Just money. $15,000 of my hard-earned savings was just money. I noticed Ashley smirking behind her wine glass, her newly injected lips curving upward in smug satisfaction. That same night, I shared news of my promotion to senior marketing manager. My father nodded absently before immediately turning to Ashley to ask about her latest sponsorship deal. "You'll never be as successful as Ashley," my mother added, as if I needed the reminder of where I stood in the family hierarchy. "She has the X factor. You're just steady." Steady, as if reliability was somehow a character flaw. By December, the gaslighting had reached new heights. Ashley had been spreading rumors about me to extended family members, suggesting I was jealous of her success, that I had mental health issues, that I was a pathological liar. When confronted at our Christmas gathering, she dramatically teared up while my parents rushed to comfort her. "You're too sensitive, Audrey. We're just teasing," my father said, his arm around Ashley's shoulders. "Stop trying to make everything about you." That night, I sat alone in my modest apartment and made a decision. I would no longer make myself available for their abuse. I would no longer be the family ATM or emotional punching bag, but I wouldn't confront them directly, not yet. Instead, I would wait, observe, and prepare. Little did they know that while they were dismissing me as just steady, I had been building something substantial in the shadows. My small side business, Cozy Crafts LLC, had grown from a hobby into a thriving enterprise. My investment portfolio was healthy, and most importantly, I had been quietly accumulating shares in Meridian Investments, the company where my brother-in-law Chad worked and where my father sat on the board. March 3rd marked the first truly overt act of exclusion. The annual Meridian Investments board meeting was approaching, and despite my status as a significant shareholder, I received no invitation. When I inquired about this oversight, Chad, Ashley's investment banker husband with the personality of a wet paper bag and the ethics of a cartoon villain, informed me that family matters would be handled by family decision-makers. I was not, apparently, considered a decision-maker. That evening, I called Janine Powell, my longtime friend and legal counsel at Morrison & Associates. They can't legally exclude a shareholder of your standing from the board meeting, she informed me after reviewing my documentation. But they're clearly trying to keep you in the dark about something. The question is, what? That question would be answered soon enough, but not before the final straw that broke my patience forever. September 23rd, a date now permanently etched in my memory. The Carter family gathered at the Fairway Club in Chicago to discuss Grandma Eleanor's will. My grandmother had passed away a month earlier, leaving behind a modest estate that was to be divided among her 4 grandchildren. I arrived early, nervous but hopeful. Grandma Eleanor had always seen me clearly, appreciated my quiet determination. She had even been the first investor in Cozy Crafts, slipping me a check for $5,000 when I graduated college, whispering, "Build something they can't ignore, Audrey." The meeting began cordially enough. Cousin Emma, the family lawyer, distributed copies of the will and began reading the distributions. My cousins Michael and Thomas received their equal shares without issue. Then came the surprise. To my granddaughter Ashley Carter, I leave the sum of $25,000, Emma read, then paused, checking her papers with a slight frown. And to my granddaughter Audrey Carter, she continued, but my mother interrupted. Actually, there's been a slight adjustment, Linda said smoothly. Robert and I have discussed this with Ashley, and we all agree that Ashley's portion should be $50,000. She has so many expenses with her career taking off, and Audrey is doing just fine with her regular job. I stared at my mother, uncomprehending. What are you talking about? Grandma wouldn't have. The money was meant for Ashley's future, not you, my mother cut in, her voice sharp despite her plastic smile. You're stable. You don't need it. But the will clearly states, Emma began, looking uncomfortable. Emma, dear, we've already settled this as a family, my father interrupted. Audrey understands that family means supporting those with the greatest potential. I looked around the table. Ashley was examining her manicure, a bored expression on her face. Chad was checking his phone. My parents were staring at me with that familiar look of disappointment and expectation, waiting for me to fold, to accommodate, to disappear as I always had. Emma caught my eye across the table, her expression unreadable but intense. I see, I said finally, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening within me. So you're taking my inheritance and giving it to Ashley. Again. Don't be dramatic, Audrey, Ashley sighed. It's just money, and it's not like you're doing anything important with your life anyway. My hands trembled as I gathered my purse and coat. I didn't trust myself to speak again. Instead, I walked out of the Fairway Club with as much dignity as I could muster, climbed into my 2015 Honda Civic, and sat in silence for exactly 17 minutes. Then I called Janine. They've gone too far this time, I told her, surprised by the calm in my voice. I want everything you can get me on Meridian investments, board minutes, shareholder records, voting histories, and I want to know exactly how much Grandma left me in her will. Audrey, Janine said cautiously, are you sure you want to go down this road? Once you start this fight— I'm not starting anything, I interrupted. They started it years ago. I'm just finally finishing it. I hung up and started my car. A plan already forming in my mind. I couldn't be their doormat anymore. For too long. I'd allowed their perception of me to define my actions. The quiet, responsible daughter. The reliable one who would always give in, give up, give away whatever they asked for. That Audrey was gone. In her place was someone they'd never bothered to see. A woman who had built a multi-million-dollar business right under their noses, a strategic thinker, a majority shareholder, a force to be reckoned with. They had no idea what was coming. The truth was, while Ashley had been posing for Instagram in borrowed designer clothes, I had been building an empire, Cozy Crafts LLC. My little hobby, as my mother dismissively called it, had expanded from handmade home decor items sold at local markets to a full-scale production and distribution operation with products in boutiques across 7 states. What started with hand-knitted throws and pottery had evolved into a comprehensive home goods line, all bearing my distinctive minimalist aesthetic. I'd secured a patent for an innovative modular shelving system that had caught the attention of several major retailers. The royalties alone provided a comfortable income stream. But I didn't stop there. I'd leveraged my marketing expertise and eye for quality to become a silent partner in 3 successful Denver restaurants, including the Blue Oak Bistro, which had just received its first Michelin star. My initial investment of $75,000 had multiplied several times over. And then there was my stock portfolio. While Chad bragged about his high-risk investment strategies at family gatherings, I quietly funneled my earnings into a carefully researched mix of stable blue chips and promising startups. Among these investments was a significant stake in Meridian Investments, the financial services company where my father served as a board member and Chad managed accounts for wealthy clients. My net worth now stood at $2.3 million, a fact I had kept carefully hidden from my family, not out of shame, but out of self-preservation. I knew that the moment they discovered my success, they would find ways to exploit it, just as they had exploited my generosity and good nature for years. But now, as I drove home from that devastating family meeting, I realized my secrecy had served another purpose. It had given me leverage they never saw coming. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously built my case. Bank statements documenting the loans Ashley had never repaid, screenshots of family text messages dismissing my achievements and mocking my career, emails regarding my exclusion from board meetings despite my shareholder status. Janine connected me with a forensic accountant who uncovered some very interesting activities in Meridian's books, specifically, unusual transactions involving accounts managed by Chad that seemed designed to benefit both him and my father, while diluting the value of shares held by smaller investors, like me. Or so they thought. What they didn't realize was that through a series of shell companies and blind trusts, all perfectly legal, I had been accumulating Meridian stock for years. My official holdings appeared modest, but my actual ownership now approached a controlling interest. With this knowledge secured, I turned my attention to timing. The annual shareholders meeting was scheduled for November 18th, 3 days after Ashley's engagement party, a lavish affair planned for November 15th at the Hamilton Plaza in Chicago, to which I had received a surprisingly warm invitation. "You absolutely must come, Odd," Ashley had insisted during a rare direct call. "I want all eyes on me for this special night. Chad's arranged for some important Meridian clients to attend, and Daddy says it could be a real networking opportunity for you. God knows you could use some better connections with that little craft business of yours." I accepted graciously, already envisioning how perfectly the venue would serve my purposes. Marcus Rivera, my right hand at Cozy Crafts, and one of the few people who knew my full story, raised an eyebrow when I told him my plan. "You're going to expose your family's manipulation at your sister's engagement party? That's cold. Audrey, calculated." "It's strategic," I corrected him, reviewing the presentation I was preparing. "And it's not just about revenge, it's about justice. For me and for all the smaller shareholders they've been cheating. Besides, Ashley chose the date deliberately to conflict with my scheduled product launch. She deserves whatever happens." Marcus didn't look convinced. "Just make sure this is really what you want. Once you cross this line, there's no going back to the way things were." I looked up from my laptop, meeting his concerned gaze. "The way things were is exactly what I'm trying to destroy. Marcus, I don't want to go back. I want to move forward. On my terms, not theirs." He nodded slowly. "Then I've got your back. We all do." That meant more to me than he could know. Over the years, while my biological family had been dismissing and diminishing me, I'd built a different kind of family. Colleagues who respected my vision, friends who valued my loyalty, mentors who recognized my potential. They were the ones who had seen me clearly all along. One of these allies was Sonia Martinez, a senior board member at Meridian who had been growing increasingly concerned about the company's direction under my father's influence. When I shared my findings with her, carefully, legally, she was appalled, but not entirely surprised. Robert has always had a blind spot when it comes to ethics, she told me during our confidential meeting, and that son-in-law of his is ambitious without the talent to back it up. Dangerous combination. Will you support me? I asked directly. When the time comes? She studied me for a long moment. You're nothing like them, are you? Despite sharing their DNA. I take after my grandmother, I replied simply. Sonia smiled. Eleanor was a force of nature, terrifying in boardrooms. I see her in you. She extended her hand. Yes, Audrey, I'll support you, and I'm not the only one who will. With Sonia's tacit promise of alliance, the final piece fell into place. I was ready. The night of November 15th arrived crisp and clear. I spent the afternoon at Chicago's most exclusive salon, emerging with a sophisticated updo and subtle makeup that enhanced without masking. For the first time in my life, I dipped into my substantial savings for pure indulgence, a Valentino gown in deep emerald that cost more than my first car. You look like a CEO, Marcus said approvingly when he picked me up at my hotel. That's the idea, I replied, smoothing the silk against my hips. Tonight, I would dress for the job I was about to take. The Hamilton Plaza glittered with expensive taste and old money. Crystal chandeliers illuminated floral arrangements taller than children. Champagne flowed freely as Chicago's elite mingled with Ashley's influencer friends, an awkward juxtaposition of old and new wealth that somehow worked because everyone present shared the same fundamental quality, a desperate need to be seen as important. I spotted my parents immediately, Linda in Chanel, Robert in bespoke Tom Ford, both working the room with practiced charm. Ashley was holding court near the grand piano, draped in white silk that strategically showcased both her diamond engagement ring and her extensive cosmetic enhancements. Chad hovered nearby, his forced smile failing to mask the anxiety in his eyes as he conversed with several older men I recognized as Meridian board members. None of them noticed me enter. I had always been invisible to them. After all, tonight, that worked to my advantage. I moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with distant relatives and family friends, carefully making my way toward the small staging area where Ashley would later make her special announcement. Undoubtedly some self-aggrandizing speech about her upcoming wedding plans. The evening progressed predictably. Dinner was served, toasts were made. Chad's father welcomed Ashley to their family with barely concealed reluctance. My mother cried photogenic tears. My father beamed with pride at his favorite daughter. At precisely 9:15 p.m., Ashley tapped her crystal flute with a silver spoon. If I could have everyone's attention, she called out, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she reserved for public performances. The room quieted. All eyes turned to her, except for Sonia's. Sonia was watching me, a slight nod indicating that everything was in place. Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate our engagement, Ashley began, pulling Chad close for a perfectly posed couple's moment. But tonight isn't just about our upcoming wedding. We have an even bigger announcement. She paused dramatically, savoring the anticipation on the faces around her. Chad has just been promoted to Vice President of Client Relations at Meridian Investments. Applause rippled through the room. Chad puffed up visibly, basking in the adulation. And, Ashley continued, her smile sharpening as her gaze finally found me in the crowd, we'll be using our new position to restructure some of the company's less productive investments, starting with divesting from certain craft enterprises that have been dragging down the portfolio. The pointed look she gave me confirmed what I had suspected. They were planning to use their influence at Meridian to damage my business interests. They just didn't realize they were already too late. I smiled back at her, raising my champagne glass in a toast. Her momentary confusion at my lack of distress was deeply satisfying. How wonderful for you both, I said, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Actually, I have an announcement of my own to make. I moved forward, joining Ashley and Chad on the small stage. My sister's eyes widened in alarm. Audrey, my mother hissed from the front table, this is your sister's night. Don't make a scene. I wouldn't dream of it, Mother, I replied pleasantly. I just thought, Since we have so many Meridian shareholders and board members present, this would be the perfect opportunity to share some important company information before tomorrow's meeting. Chad's face drained of color. This isn't the time or place. Oh, but I think it is, I interrupted smoothly, turning to address the room. For those who don't know me, I'm Audrey Carter, Ashley's older sister, Robert and Linda's daughter, and as of this morning, the majority shareholder of Meridian Investments. The silence that followed was absolute. I could practically hear the collective intake of breath. That's impossible, my father finally sputtered. The shareholding reports were incomplete, I finished for him. Deliberately so. It seems a full audit has revealed numerous discrepancies in how shares have been allocated and reported over the past 3 years. Discrepancies that primarily benefited 2 people in this room, while disadvantaging other investors. I nodded to Sonia, who pressed a button on her phone. The massive screen behind us, originally intended for a slideshow of Ashley and Chad's romantic moments, now displayed a damning collection of financial records, emails, and transaction histories. This is outrageous, Chad protested, his voice cracking. You can't just… I can and I have, I cut in. The Securities and Exchange Commission has already been notified. They're particularly interested in these transactions. I gestured to a highlighted section of the display. Funny how funds kept moving from corporate accounts to shell companies that ultimately benefited my sister's lifestyle brand and my brother-in-law's personal accounts. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Board members exchanged concerned glances. Several were already on their phones, undoubtedly calling their lawyers. Audrey, stop this right now, my mother demanded, her carefully Botoxed face struggling to display appropriate outrage. You're embarrassing yourself and this family. That's where you're wrong, Mother, I replied calmly. For the first time in my life, I'm not embarrassing myself. I'm standing up for myself. And as for this family, I looked around at the shocked faces of my parents, sister, and brother-in-law. I think you've done enough damage to that concept already. I turned back to the gathered crowd. Tomorrow's board meeting will address these issues formally. A new leadership structure will be proposed. And yes, Ashley, I added, glancing at my sister's stunned face. Certain unprofitable ventures will indeed be divested, starting with your husband's position. The room erupted in chaos. Chad lunged toward me, only to be intercepted by security personnel Sonia had discreetly stationed nearby. My father was surrounded by angry board members demanding explanations. My mother was frozen in place, her social mask cracking to reveal the fury beneath. And Ashley simply stared at me as though seeing me for the first time. Perhaps she was. I stepped down from the stage, my Valentino gown whispering against the polished floor. As I passed my sister, I paused. By the way, I said quietly, for her ears only, Grandma left us each exactly $25,000. The additional amount you received was taken from my portion. With interest, you owe me $26,138.90. I'll expect a check by the end of the month. Without waiting for her response, I continued through the crowd, accepting handshakes and business cards from suddenly interested Meridian investors and board members. By the time I reached the exit, I had secured enough proxy votes to guarantee tomorrow's outcome. Marcus waited for me by the door, concern evident in his expression. Are you okay? I considered the question carefully. Behind me, my biological family's carefully constructed world was imploding. Ahead of me lay a challenging road, restructuring a company, restoring ethical practices, building something sustainable from the ruins of my father and Chad's mismanagement. I'm better than okay, I answered truthfully. I'm free. The next morning dawned bright and cold. I dressed with deliberate care. A tailored charcoal suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon, professional, authoritative, unmistakably in command. The Meridian Investments headquarters occupied the top floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. As I approached the main entrance, I spotted my father and Chad huddled with their lawyers near the security desk. They fell silent as I approached. Audrey, my father began, his tone conciliatory. "We should talk privately before the meeting. I think you've misunderstood some aspects of the company's structure." "Save it for the board, Robert," I replied, using his first name deliberately. "Everything will be addressed there." Chad stepped forward, desperation evident in every line of his body. "You can't do this. You don't understand what you're doing. The markets will react." "The markets are already reacting," I informed him, checking my phone. "Our stock is up 7 points in pre-trading on rumors of a leadership change. Seems investors approve of transparency and ethical management. Imagine that." I brushed past them, head high as I crossed the lobby toward the executive elevators. The security guard, who had undoubtedly been instructed many times in the past to keep me out, now held the door open with a respectful nod. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," he said, and for the first time, there was no question in his tone about whether I belonged. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. Sonia had positioned herself strategically at the center of the long table, with several allied board members clustered nearby. My father's usual seat at the head remained conspicuously empty. As I entered, conversation ceased. All eyes turned to me, some curious, some wary, some openly hostile. I recognized the mix of emotions. I had seen it all my life in my family's eyes. The underestimation, the dismissal, the moment of shocked reassessment when I occasionally exceeded their minimal expectations. But today was different. Today, I wasn't seeking their approval or recognition. Today, I was taking what was rightfully mine. "Good morning," I greeted them, moving to stand at the head of the table. "I believe we have a full agenda, so let's begin." "You're out of order," protested Walter Hargrove, my father's longtime ally on the board. "Robert chairs these meetings, and we haven't even established if you have standing to—" "Ms. Carter's standing has been verified by our legal team," Sonia interrupted smoothly, sliding documents across the table. "As majority shareholder, she has every right to be here and to propose the changes outlined in the brief before you." Walter snatched up the papers, his face darkening as he scanned their contents. "This is preposterous. You can't possibly expect us to vote on restructuring the entire executive team in one session." "Actually, we can," I replied calmly. "The bylaws are quite clear. When evidence of malfeasance emerges, the board is not only empowered, but obligated to take immediate action to protect shareholder interests." I tapped my tablet, and the wall screen activated, displaying the same damning evidence I had revealed the night before, but now accompanied by detailed financial analyses and legal opinions. "As you can see," I continued, "certain members of the current leadership have been engaged in systematic self-dealing, misallocation of corporate resources, and deliberate manipulation of shareholder reports. The SEC, as I mentioned yesterday, has been notified. Their investigation is pending." The boardroom doors burst open, and my father stormed in, followed by Chad and their legal team. His face was mottled with rage, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. "This is a hostile takeover," he declared, slamming his briefcase onto the table. "My daughter has orchestrated this coup for personal reasons, not business ones. She's emotionally unstable, vengeful." "That's enough, Robert," Sonia cut in sharply. "Your personal attacks only underscore the dysfunction that has characterized your leadership. The evidence speaks for itself." "Evidence that can be explained," Chad interjected desperately. "Those transactions were authorized." "By whom?" I asked mildly. "Because they certainly weren't approved by this board. There are no minutes, no votes, no proper documentation, just money flowing from company coffers to personal projects. Like, for instance, a certain influencer's luxury vacations documented as market research." Chad paled, glancing nervously at my father. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as board members began to fully grasp the implications. "I move that we proceed to a vote," Sonia announced firmly. "The proposal before us is to remove Robert Carter as chairman and CEO, terminate Chad Williams's employment effective immediately, and appoint Audrey Carter as interim CEO while a full audit and restructuring is conducted." "I second the motion," said Thomas Blackwell, the board's eldest member, who had remained silent until now. He looked directly at me, his expression grave. "Your grandmother would be proud, young lady. She always said you were the one to watch." The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 8-3 in favor of the restructuring. My father, Walter, and one other loyalist opposed. The remaining board members, sensing which way the wind was blowing, aligned themselves with the new reality. As the results were formally recorded, my father leaned across the table toward me, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won? You've destroyed this family." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Robert, you did that long ago. I'm just picking up the pieces and building something better." He straightened, adjusting his tie with shaking hands. "Your mother will never forgive this betrayal." "I stopped seeking her forgiveness years ago." I replied simply, "just as I stopped seeking your approval." With nothing left to say, he gathered his belongings and left the boardroom, Chad trailing behind like a scolded puppy. The door closed behind them with a soft click that somehow felt more final than any slam could have. Sonia approached, extending her hand. "Congratulations, CEO Carter. Ready to get to work?" I took her hand, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto my shoulders. Not as a burden, but as a mantle I had earned through years of patience, preparation, and quiet persistence. "I've been ready my whole life," I answered. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. As interim CEO, I worked closely with the board to stabilize Meridian's operations, reassure clients, and cooperate fully with the SEC investigation. The company's stock, after an initial period of volatility, steadied and then began to climb as the markets responded positively to our transparency initiatives. The fallout in my personal life was exactly as expected. My mother left a series of increasingly hysterical voicemails, vacillating between threats and tearful pleas. Ashley launched a social media campaign portraying herself as the victim of a jealous sister's machinations, until her followers began questioning the source of her luxury lifestyle and abandoned her in droves. My father attempted a counteroffensive through business channels, but his reputation was irreparably damaged by the emerging evidence of his ethical lapses. Former allies distanced themselves, invitations dried up, country club memberships were quietly revoked. I received a text from Ashley 3 weeks after the board meeting. It was the first direct communication from any family member that wasn't accusatory or manipulative. "I underestimated you," she wrote. "We all did." I stared at those words for a long time, feeling the truth of them settle into my bones. Yes, they had underestimated me, and in doing so, they had given me the greatest advantage possible, the element of surprise. I didn't respond to her message. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I focused on rebuilding Meridian from the inside out. I assembled a leadership team based on merit rather than connections. I implemented oversight systems to prevent future abuses. I personally reviewed the company's investment portfolio, redirecting resources towards sustainable, ethical ventures. 1 month after taking the helm, I convened my first company-wide meeting. Hundreds of employees filled the auditorium, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism about their new leader. I stepped up to the podium, surveying the sea of faces before me. These people depended on Meridian for their livelihoods. They deserved honest leadership and a company they could be proud to represent. "For too long," I began, "Meridian has operated under a philosophy that prioritized appearance over substance, short-term gains over long-term stability, and the interests of a few over the welfare of many. Today, we begin a new chapter." I outlined my vision for the company, a vision built on the same principles that had guided my own quiet success over the years: integrity, persistence, strategic thinking, genuine value creation. "Some of you may wonder how a marketing manager from Denver ended up as your CEO," I acknowledged, drawing a ripple of nervous laughter from the crowd. "The simple answer is this: I paid attention. I built something sustainable while others were focused on quick wins. I played the long game." I paused, allowing my gaze to sweep across the room. "And that's exactly what Meridian will do moving forward. We will make decisions based not on quarterly pressures or personal agendas, but on what builds lasting value for our clients, our shareholders, and each of you. The applause that followed was tentative at first, then growing in strength and conviction. By the time I stepped away from the podium, it had swelled to a standing ovation, not for the Carter name that had previously dominated Meridian, but for the specific Carter who had refused to accept the limitations placed upon her. As I walked back to my office, my father's former corner suite, now redesigned to reflect my own aesthetic, I passed the wall of company photographs chronicling Meridian's history. My father's portrait had already been removed, leaving a conspicuous empty space in the lineup of past leaders. Soon, my own image would hang there, not as Robert Carter's daughter, but as Audrey Carter, CEO, the woman who transformed Meridian Investments from a vehicle for family enrichment into a beacon of corporate responsibility. I paused before the empty space, remembering all the family gatherings where I had been overlooked, all the achievements that had gone unacknowledged, all the times I had been made to feel small and insignificant. They should have paid more attention, I murmured to the vacant wall. They should have seen me coming. But they hadn't. They had dismissed me as the quiet one, the steady one, the responsible daughter who would always give in to their demands. They had mistaken my patience for weakness, my restraint for lack of ambition, my strategic silence for having nothing to say. Their underestimation had been their downfall, and my salvation. I continued down the hallway toward my office, where Sonia and the new executive team awaited me. There was still so much work to be done, so many systems to reform, so much damage to repair. The road ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in my life, I was walking a path entirely of my own choosing, no longer defined by family expectations or limitations, no longer invisible, no longer underestimated. I was finally fully seen, and the view from here was everything I had worked for. My name is Audrey Carter. I'm 32 years old and the CEO of Meridian Investments. I built an empire while my family wasn't looking, and when they finally noticed me, it was already too late. They thought they knew me. They thought they could control me. They thought I would always be the person they had decided I was. They were wrong, and I was ready.